Hello, hello, hello. This is L Army. Welcome to Hippie in the City. I'm joined today by Ainslie Macleod. He is a world-renowned psychic medium, author, and artist. He has been featured on Oprah's Super Soul Sunday series. Dr. Oz says he is at the forefront of exploration into the soul and its profound influence on our physical selves. In Men's Health magazine, author Sean Hotchkiss describes Ainslie as the psychic of the moment, alongside other soul men like Joe Rogan and Russell Brand. I was turned on to Ainslie's first book, The Instruction, after listening to Super Soul Sunday, and now his latest book, his baby, The Old Soul's Guidebook, just turned 1 year old this month. You can buy it on Amazon or at any local bookstore, and you'll automatically be entered into his giveaway, which ends at the end of April. You can win various prizes like a free session with Ainslie and a membership to his wonderful Soul World community. Ainslie is so kind and generous with his wisdom. Please love Ainslie Macleod. So I'm talking here to Ainslie Macleod. He is the author of The Instruction and now The Old Soul's Guidebook, Who You Are, Why You're Here, and How to Navigate Life on Earth. So welcome, Ainslie.
Well, good to be here. Thank you so much for having me. And yeah, it sounds like we're talking about big stuff.
Big
today,
stuff.
right?
I know. I have a lot of very big questions. So I'm going to see how many we can get through. And then also, I'm sure that there's probably a very big common theme here. So even though they seem pretty big, I'm sure that it's even more simple and close to our understanding than you would think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm ready and willing. Just fire them at me.
Okay, so I know from reading your books and listening to other podcasts and things that you've done, some of your backstory, but can you give us a brief introduction into how you got into working with your spirit guides full time and being a psychic for the physical plane?
Yeah. I mean, my creation story is I started off as a total non-believer, and I had no time for any of that sort of spiritual stuff. I just I thought it was for weak-minded people or something like that. I consider myself to be an atheist for a huge part of my life, and then I had a couple of experiences. One was when a prediction from a psychic came true, and then um, and in quite that seemed like quite a dramatic way. And the other one was I talk about a lot because it was really sort of the big thing that changed everything for me, was that I ran into my uncle in a bookstore in Hawaii, and it was a bit of a surprise because he'd been dead at that point for probably about a decade. So it was like, I just turned a corner and suddenly there's my uncle. Now, up until that point, I'd been drawn to psychics. So there I am, a sort of non-believer, but somehow strangely drawn to psychics. I would tell myself I was going to them to debunk them, and then, found that there seemed to be like, somehow mysteriously they were able to get accurate information. So I was quite really very fascinated by psychics. So I kept hearing from psychics that my uncle was a spirit guide and he wanted to work with me. And he had been an atheist like me, and so I kind of thought, well, yeah, sure, I can't see him being a spirit guide. But sure enough, as it turned out he was. So after the experience in Hawaii, running into him, well, he very clearly wanted to work with me, and I kept hearing from psychics, he wants to work with you, and so I kind of just gave it a try, and so just made myself available and said, okay, like, talk to me. And then I found that I could actually communicate with the other side. And it was it was huge. I mean, for me, of course, it changed everything. I wouldn't describe myself as an atheist anymore. I mean, it certainly opened my eyes to the fact that there's something, huge beyond this. And that had always fascinated me. It was how can psychics get accurate information about you? How do they know all this stuff?
Yeah.
And that was what I was really sort of wanting to figure out. And then I started talking to spirit guides on the other side, and of course, that was what I really wanted to know. Who are we? Why are we here? What's this all about? It was stuff that had always fascinated me. Things like why would you get somebody who's so, peace loving and concerned about justice, and somebody else who doesn't give a damn about that? It doesn't seem to be a matter of education or intelligence. Why is one person a gun-toting right winger, somebody else is a tree-hugging left winger? That's sort of, trying to understand the diversity and why we would have such strong and such varied beliefs. That was what always really fascinated me. And so what I did was I was able to tap into the source. I was tapping into spirit guides and able to ask all these big questions. And so I had the sort of major epiphanies, and that took me. I was for years. I was a freelance illustrator, cartoon illustrator, and I just decided, no, there's something bigger here that I wanted to do. So I actually spent a lot of time practicing, really learning to connect with the other side. I think sometimes people think, yeah, you got some psychic ability and that's all it takes. But it's like anything. It's like being a musician or an artist. You have to work at it. You have to practice, and that's what I did in my early days. So I spent about three years before ever reading anybody. So
Before doing a session with a client.
I didn't want to do it for real. If there's any chance I would get things wrong.
Yeah.
It's like I was paranoid about the consequences. That was my stuff. It's kind of past life stuff, which of course has become a really big part of what I do. And that was, when I started working with people, it was just, very quickly, past life seemed to come up, and that became the area that really has and still fascinates me.
So your journey with some of the knowledge and conversations with your spirit guides sort of started with the soul specifically, and then has even further deepened into past life
That's
experiences and
that's
trauma.
that's about it. Yeah, it's kind of it was initially, what's the soul's purpose, and then what I really learned pretty quickly was that if you really want to understand who you are, you need to know who you were,
Mm-hmm.
because we're all, in ways that I think really most of us are unaware, we're all the result of our past life experiences. That really everything we carry, our talents, for example, talents are all past life abilities. You learn to develop certain talents in past lives, and then you can use them in this. And so you might find that a talent for logic is developed in a past life, perhaps through very left brain kind of work, and then you can apply that to maybe doing IT or something in the modern world. But you'll see all these talents, they can be identified, and you can understand how to use them in your life. That's part of what I talk about in my books. Fears are all past life related. Your entire personality is past life related, because you learn to be certain soul types. It's a big part of what I talk about in my books. That you learn the traits and behaviors that then show up in this life. So when I'm working with somebody, I can break that down, identify the different elements of the personality, and see how they show up in this life.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, whatever shows up, you kind of you want to use.
Yeah, you want to work with it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I took the well, of course I have read the instruction and taken your advice in the instruction, but I also did your soul type quiz on your website.
Mm-hmm.
and I got 16.
Oh, no, hold on. Before you tell me, I'll just tell you, I didn't do a proper reading of you. I haven't done that yet, but
Yeah.
just there's a couple of things that really do show up. So I would expect them to show up in the quiz. So I do this in sessions, I have people going, "Oh, I took your quiz," and I go, no, shut up. It's my job, It's like, don't take away these small pleasures from me. It's like what I love doing. So you have in your soul types, the personality you've chosen, you've got a very strong performer influence. Now, I don't know where it falls because I haven't done, like I say, a proper reading. We should do that sometimes so we get a really good picture. But it's part of you that's it's really about communication and self-expression. But it's a big trait. It's a big one for this life, and it has a lot to do with what you're doing literally right now. This thing of kind of reaching out. I did an informal study just after my book first came out. I did a lot of podcast interviews, and just a sort of like quick take on whoever was reading me. And what I found was that there were some common things, and they do show up with you as well. And that is that performer needs to connect with other people. There's also a past life fear around rejection. It comes from something like dying alone or feeling abandoned at the end of a past life. And it shows up in this life. Usually it's a little tendency to feel a bit of an outsider, or like you don't fully fit in. But the main thing here is that you want to unite. You want to bring people together. And this is the thing that I found with everyone who was interviewing me. Had somewhere in there was that performer influence, and somewhere there was that fear of rejection the soul was trying to overcome by uniting, sort of bringing the tribe together. And that shows up for you. There is a past life I can talk to you about that might make some sense as well if you're interested. You had a fairly recent past life in France somewhere. And there was some unpleasant stuff that came up from that. So, I mean, a major traumatic event in that life was as a result of rape, and which you survived, but you dealt with it in a kind of interesting way, and it was through a sort of academic path. You were a professor. I don't know what the subject was, but very academic. And you wrote something. The spirit guides described you as being sort of early feminist, but sort of what the experience of this kind of disempowerment had done in this experience of the rape, which it can cause a past life or trigger a past life issue around powerlessness, because it might be maybe you're restrained or you were somehow very much disempowered. And so what you were trying to do in that life was kind of get your power back, get your voice back. Unfortunately, what you did was, and I even there's a story in my book, which I touched on. It was somebody I was working with who did it. It was done a very similar thing, which is to write academically. Maybe only half a dozen people will ever read whatever you wrote, because it's just going into an academic library somewhere. Maybe you wrote a paper, but what you want to do in this life is very different. What you're trying to do is really reach an awful lot of people, because you wanted to make that difference. What the soul took from that life, that past life, was that, there you were trying to, get your power back, try to help other people, but you were ineffective because you weren't really reaching anyone. So in this life, the important thing is that you build a following, you put your opinions and your beliefs out there, and you do it with confidence. Because what your soul is trying to avoid here is anything trivial. It doesn't want to, you don't want to be interviewing people about something that just absolutely it's inconsequential. You're looking to really shape people's minds and give them insights and enlightenment. This is like a deep soul motivation to make a difference. Choosing the performer as part of your personality is to make sure that you are connecting with people. And not shying away from that, because one of the things that I think with if you compare the past life to this present life, what your soul's really trying to make sure is that you have a broad audience.
Mm-hmm.
What it will be saying is, look, if we could reach 5 people in that last life with no effort, then with a bit of effort in this life we can reach 5,000 or 5 million or
Mm-hmm.
something.
Mm-hmm.
The soul wants that part of your soul anyway wants the biggest bang for its buck. If you're going to put anything out there, you want the biggest audience for it. It's really the intention here is to get to the end of this life and be able to look back and feel that you really made a difference.
Yeah.
And that impetus, it's called a desire for immortality. It's nothing to do with living forever, but it's all about leaving a legacy or creating a ripple effect,
Mm-hmm.
but really feeling that you've made a difference in this life. So there's a lot of things that I expect to come up from that past life. Usually when somebody suffered rape or sexual violence in a past life, they can be very easily triggered by maybe witnessing like a rape scene in a movie or something like that. You read about it. Sometimes you can be really triggered by anything that's like an abuse of power, seeing the underdog being mistreated. So it gives you a very strong sense of justice and fairness as well. And of course, you being a sort of early feminist in that life, I don't know when it was. I think it's sort of mid 20th century. I'd imagine that would be a pretty strong trait, strong thing in you right now.
Yeah, you have touched on quite a lot that I mean, I resonate with absolutely all of that. I studied French all my life, so instead of Spanish, which is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I am a huge feminist, and I have had actually I never feel like I'm doing enough for it. And even in past relationships, I definitely felt the feeling of powerlessness or being trapped that was so deep in me that I knew it had to be from a past life.
Yeah.
And I would say, like, I just feel so deeply connected to the women's movement that I can't like stay in this relationship if it doesn't mirror that kind of those kind of ideals. And I definitely feel it's interesting you said that because about reaching a lot of people, because I have been struggling with understanding that part of my motivation, because I definitely feel that, and it never seems to be growing fast enough or reaching enough people.
Right.
And I for a long time have been wondering why I have that desire, because I'm like, is it for fame? Because that doesn't seem right to me. Is it, am I good enough or sharing good enough information that matters? Or, a lot of big questions that I was always really wondering why my motivation to reach a lot of people was, because I knew it wasn't self-serving, but somehow it still feels self-serving, and it's been a point of confusion for a while.
Well, this is something I talk to people about, that, and this again goes to having that strong performer in your soul type. That there is a message that performers get. You think of the different lifetimes where you learn to be a performer. You were singer, actor, dancer. It's about expression. A lot to do with creativity as well. One of the things about being performers that you want to be, that's the part that should be comfortable being in the spotlight, being noticed. Unfortunately, the message that we often get from, it could be past lives or earlier in this life, if you have the performer in there, somebody will have told you, stop showing off, or stop, I was wanting to be about you, or whatever. It's every soul type, there's some pejorative way of looking at it, unfortunately. And when you get that message, then that part of you can send out a little message saying to the conscious mind, saying, maybe it's egotistical to want to do this, to have this big audience. And something else that shows up in your life plan is actually called a desire for fame. And it doesn't mean that you're meant to be a household name. It's certainly not about sort of shallow, Hollywood style uh, fame. But it's almost always chosen to make sure that if you get attention, that you don't push it away. Kind of saying, "Oh well, somehow it's egotistical, or maybe I shouldn't be doing this." It's to really learn to embrace it. And the simple truth is that if you want to make a difference, you need to reach as many people as you possibly can.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just as simple as that. You need a big audience, but especially because it's karmic, because if you think of the pendulum swinging from one life to the next, so you got in one life, you reach half a dozen people, made little difference when you were really trying to. It comes back to this, and almost like an overcorrection where you're going to feel, I need to be making a difference. Constant feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm not changing the world fast enough.
Yeah,
And
I
it's like
do.
constant internal pressure.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So wait, I had now I have a million questions. Now I need to hone in here.
Okay.
The Oh, okay. This was when I was something that you just touched on that I've been trying to formulate. So when you have your urges or your signals that are sort of lighting, your way in your life path, your pull towards destiny.
Mm-hmm.
How do you distinguish that feeling from a feeling of a past life memory?
Hmm. Well, it would be very hard to separate out because, it
Mm.
really is the past life, so often the past life experiences that are giving us the
Fuel.
impetus,
Mhm.
like, yeah, the energy to
Mm.
make a difference. Um, so yeah, I mean, it's so hard to separate, I mean, that's in fact the soul's biggest challenge is separating what happened in other lifetimes from this. Is why it carries on to fears or where they get triggered in this life, because the soul worries that something that happened 100 years ago is going to happen again in
Mm.
this life, because
Mhm.
it doesn't die between lives, so it's kind of conscious throughout.
Mhm.
um, you might be on life 100, but your soul's not. It's still on life one. So yeah, it's really very, very hard to separate out. I think the one thing I do try to help people is figure out what's coming from a place of fear and what's coming from a
Mm.
positive part of your life plan.
Mhm.
So um, yeah, I mean, for example, you have in your life plan something called a mission of exploration. That's something an old soul like you would choose to really get a lot done in this life. The marker is travel, so you should enjoy travel, and you should have moved around quite a bit.
Yeah.
You know, by now it's a big part of that.
Mhm.
Um, but there can also be fears that can show up, and they could they could sort of masquerade a little bit like that, but it would be you would be doing a lot of things. It could be a fear of failure. Then, your soul is trying to make up for lost time, say from a short, disappointing past life.
Mhm.
And so it's got this internal pressure to make a difference and to do a lot of things. But it's coming from a place of fear. If you get rid of the fear, you would still have the mission of exploration. You still get a lot, but you have less of that headless chicken running around
Mm.
circles,
Using it
not
more
really getting where you want to
efficiently and
be.
wisely instead of.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it'll be much more directed rather than sort of like almost overwhelm. So many things I need to do, and then ending up doing nothing because it's
Mm,
almost like your
that's a,
soul's
a big
reluctant to go.
part of my story.
I wanted to mention too, because of again, this is the significant thing about the disempowerment in the past life.
Mhm.
Any feeling of being, coerced, um, restrained, and so on. In this life, it's technically it's called a fear of powerlessness, and it shows up but the most common way it shows up is summed up in the phrase, "Don't tell me what to do." If somebody asks you, it's one thing. If they tell you, you're going to get that reaction. Your soul will go back to that past life kind of in a nanosecond, and if it senses coercion, it comes right back going, "Okay, don't tell me what to do." So if you haven't said it, you've thought it. I mean, okay, probably more than once.
Yes.
And the other thing that would show up is the challenge would be often in a relationship, because the soul will feel in this life, don't fence me in. Don't tell me what to do. Don't make me feel coerced.
Mhm.
Don't try to control me. I mean, I would imagine, if somebody ever tried to control you, that, you'd just leave them in the dust. It would like,
Yes.
they'd only do it once. It's like, you can't do it. And also this thing of personal freedom is really, really big. You need to feel like that, the world's your oyster, that you can travel, you've got the freedom to do things. It's a bit of a problem when you're kind of under lockdown, quarantine.
Yeah.
It's a difficult thing for a lot of people right now. It shows up, a lot of past life fears show up when people
Mhm.
are in a situation like they are right at the moment.
Yeah.
So,
I've been trying to use my mental exploration if I can't use my physical
yeah,
exploration. And um,
absolutely. Going within. This is a
yeah.
great time to do that.
Hmm. Um, yeah, I've been also, along with reading your book, The Old Soul's Guidebook, I've been reading The Secret History of the World.
Oh,
Have you read
that
that?
no, but it sounds like my kind of thing.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's a nice like esoteric compilation of all kinds of uh, things from all kinds of different religions and astrology and
Hmm.
all kinds of things, and it's just stuff like that. And they so that has been really nice for my mind to feel like I'm exploring different
Right.
times, different ideologies, and seeing how they might be connected and things like that. And one thing it talks about that I wanted to actually ask you about is it talks about the cosmic mind that sort of um, and it's very dense, so they don't spell it out in it's it's not telling you what was. It's just this might be a kind of history. Anyway, it's so it talks about the cosmic mind that is what we would consider God, and that the cosmic mind had an intention before matter came to be. And I wondered if your spirit guides had any sort of information on if that's true, or if there is sort of a collective consciousness.
Well, that's actually, they do talk about collective consciousness. They talk about universal consciousness, that's kind of out there, that really does as they say, it permeates the universe.
Mm.
This consciousness is kind of everywhere, and so I think that might be. The spirit guides say that they have to use language, metaphors, and so on to help us understand concepts that are purely energetic and really sort of, it can't get our tiny little brains around,
Yeah.
But that sounds about right. That there is a sort of that we are all part of that huge universal consciousness. That
Hmm.
all over the universe, souls are coming into the physical plane like we're doing.
Hmm.
I liken it, or the spirit guides actually liken it to a spark from a flame.
Mm.
So those flames out there, and then these little sparks come in and inhabit our bodies. Um, we start off. I mean, for somebody like you, and probably people who would be listening to this kind of material, you're very old souls, probably been around back and forth on this plane for 5, 6, 7,000 years. It's been you know, quite an incredible journey,
Hmm.
starting off with that little spark and coming in here, and then life after life until there's a point where your soul goes, okay, I think we're done. And then you
Hmm.
kind of eventually, um, it's quite a process, but eventually you will rejoin that um, universal consciousness,
Mm.
become part of that. The spirit guides do talk too about the collective consciousness, and even I've not gone into any depth with them, so I can't really talk with great authority about it. But they do talk about how there are different sort of levels or groups of collective consciousness. So we can have a collective consciousness as artists, or as healers, or there's collective consciousness that involves your soul family and so on. There's a sort of global one. the great thing right now is that we are, although it looks, if you read the news or look at the world, it looks like chaotic, and it is to a great extent. There's some big shifts going on.
Mm-hmm.
There's a shift in consciousness. It was the subject of my second book, The Transformation, which is, it's literally about this transformation, shift in consciousness that will, like a rising tide, is going to raise all the vessels, and including even those who are showing such resistance right now.
Mm-hmm.
Younger souls acting out is how I describe it. They're losing control. They don't know what to make of it, and so it is really chaotic as they sort of fight back and struggle to maintain control as consciousness is rising, and sort of and that just shows up in how we are about social issues and politics. you know I mention in my book, getting messages from people saying, you need to stay out of politics, like, as if somehow, if you're teaching spiritual matters, like somehow that is inconsistent, or uh, shouldn't come down to that sort of level. But everything's political, and um, we're all here to help each other. We should be doing a hell of a lot more of it.
Yeah.
But we just, unfortunately, it's the effect of what they call the illusion, a sort of illusion of separateness. And if the world were operating according to old soul values, and how it really should be, then we all would be really supporting each other much more. I mean, things like, issues that are so almost like a no-brainer for an old experienced soul is like, um, kind of, universal healthcare, for example. I mean, it is for an old soul like such a no-brainer. Like, why wouldn't you want to do that? So all this money for bombs and missiles, why come we can't put that into making sure everyone's taken care of? And but we live in a younger soul world, and it's all sort of muddied, and we can't afford it. Oh, that's socialism, whatever. So, but as things grow, we'll see more of that sort of old soul consciousness coming through. And there's a lot of older soul politicians, for example.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yeah, yeah, a lot of the and a lot of them women as well. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, for example, and others came in recently. Much more, old soul. And this isn't about partisan politics. It's just really just about this simply as the soul ages, it becomes much more connected to others and humanity, and wanting the best, not just for itself, but for others. I mean, that's just part of the whole journey. As I say, it takes the soul from a place of me to we.
And, do you think that we, in our human history, that we were more, I mean, of course we were more collective,
yeah,
thousands of years ago, and operated more in sort of a herd mentality, a kind of group conscious.
yeah.
Do you think that was more of an old soul world?
It in a lot of ways, yes. If you think of, going back to your first few lifetimes, they would have been on, they've been in places on the planet that were probably, well, it would be Neolithic, I think, Stone Age, basically. It's kind of tribal. And what I get from the spirit world is that back then we had much more. We had a much clearer idea of things like soul types, that I talk about. There are at least 10 soul types that, different combinations of them really make any of us who we are. And of course, that's the first thing I would look at in a session, with somebody, just, figure out who they are, because who you are is why you're here. And so these traits that you develop back in the tribe would stand out, and it would be very, very clear, that, for example, if you chose to come into a life as a creator type, well, I mean, you're not going to have huge opportunities back in Stone Age times, but it would be pretty clear that you'd be pretty good as a potter, or doing something creative, making some jewelry or clothing or something like that. No one would have expected you to pick up a spear and go and hunt down a woolly mammoth or something, because that there were hunters and leader types to do that. They were much more sort of, physical and action oriented and so on. So we had a much clearer idea of who we were
Mm.
all those thousands of years ago. Going back even further, it was much clearer. And we didn't, back in our very early days, well, we didn't have to fight for resources the same as we would have to do later. So that would certainly create some divisions. But then as we became much more into, got into sort of more creating, cities, but, things becoming more sort of urban and sophisticated. One of the things that we lost was that sort of connection to really who we were. And then that idea of taking sensitive creator types and forcing them to go to war, or square pegs into round holes all over the place, instead of the leaders being literally leader types with all that past life experience. Then you get people who are totally unsuited for it, the wrong personality, but they're power hungry or whatever. I mean, that would never happen in the modern world, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Well, I was going to ask.
fortunately, we see that all the time,
All the
but,
time.
yeah.
Do you think that, and maybe this is just my understanding in this lifetime, but I I find that there's just so much more anxiety and depression than maybe it's just because people are more open about it. Maybe it's been there the whole time and in many other lifetimes.
Yeah.
But do you think part of that is some of the modernization and people not being in the right roles?
Absolutely. I think that's a really big part of it. I mean, certainly, education in the main tends to be cookie cutter. Doesn't really allow for the 10 soul types, for those personalities to be really recognized and nurtured. And I think that could make one of the biggest differences if we weren't continually trying to fit people into an idea of how they should be. And that we, because you can see it in a baby. I mean, I read my kids when they were born, and like, an hour after birth, I've got a reading on each of them, and then it's just been, they're late teenagers now, and it's
Is it
just been,
easier to read a baby or an adult?
doesn't make any difference.
Okay.
Same source, and so, but what it's what it showed me is like, who they were, and I could at least help to nurture some of those things. But I mean, I remember one of my kids, I was at a what they call a student-led parent-teacher conference, and I'm sitting with a teacher and my oldest kid, who's one of these interesting types, who's kind of like very thinkerly, very rational, very creative as well, sort of split down the middle. Was talking about wanting to be, perhaps the path forward was to either be a scientist or an artist. And I was an artist for years, so it's of course very encouraging about that. But the teacher's going, well, you can do science and do the art on the side, because you can't make a living as an artist. And I was, good God, it's smoke coming out my ears. It's
Yeah.
like, it's like, having to really bite my tongue there. And, and my kid is now on the science path, an oceanographer, but incredibly creative and almost doing, creative projects. I'm kind of going off, at a tangent, but it's the educational system, it doesn't nurture the artists or the healers quite. I mean, it's like, the problem sometimes is that the left side of the brain, the very thinkerly part, gets all the attention.
Yeah.
As I said in one of my books, that your teachers will never tell you to go away and work on your intuition, but they will tell you to go and work on extra math or something like that.
Yes.
It tends to keep you more on the left side of the brain than the right.
I had a really difficult education career, and luckily I have a very large family, so I sort of have this really big tribe of many different types of people. And my dad was very instrumental in helping me to understand the right side of my brain, and he would
Mm.
help me to learn some math and sciences by being creative. We would go
Oh,
out and to the wood shop, and he would teach me how to make things, and we would learn physics and geometry
mm.
that way so that I could get that. And so he's definitely one of my um, keys in this lifetime too.
Yes, and that would be all by agreement, all by sole agreement.
Mm-hmm.
He would
Before
have,
born.
you'd expect him to have a very strong educator influence in there, really, and that enjoyment of passing on knowledge, but probably a lot of creativity as well to find different ways of doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, that's much more how it should be.
Yeah, it's definitely, I mean, he didn't necessarily have that lifeline, so he made sure to recognize that in me and then foster it so that I could,
Hmm.
make it through the traditional schooling system, which I
Yeah,
have a lot of gusto about. It
yeah.
frustrates me. So I have this my cousins and I, my some of my female cousins and I have, since we were children, have always said we were really happy and pleased that we got to be in the same family this go around.
Oh. Hmm.
And only until I read your book did I start it really opened my mind to like, wow, that's so strange. We've been saying this our whole lives. It didn't really dawn on me until I was reading your books that might actually be true instead of just a statement that we were really fond of each other, so we were trying to say it in a magnanimous way. Is it possible for multiple people in the same soul family to sort of come down at the same time?
The spirit guides describe it as the great game.
Hmm.
What they're doing all the time is trying to connect us with members of the soul family. So if you think of it, when you come into this world, that very first life, you're coming in as that spark off a flame.
Hmm.
There's actually a whole bunch of other sparks that come in at the same time. We come into the world in groups. This is your soul family,
Mm-hmm.
and the soul family, they're obviously going to be roughly your soul age throughout. It's like a horse race. I mean, you all sort of start off at the same point, but somebody lags behind a little bit and somebody's way out in front. So they can have some differences in age, but generally you're going to see the world through the same lenses. And so as you get to be, well, when you're a young soul, you don't care too much about this because you've got so many lifetimes ahead. It's just the soul has a thirst for experience. It's here to learn, so it doesn't care too much when it's got 50 or 60 lifetimes ahead of it. Really who it knocks about with. But the older it gets, well, the moment it really becomes an old soul, which is roughly halfway through all your lives, then it goes, okay, now I want to really be around the ones I've known before. So these are termed old friends. These are members of your soul family that you've known before. And so when you meet old friends, and especially as you get to be a very old soul, you're going to be surrounding yourself as much as you possibly can with these old friends.
Mm-hmm.
And so they could very easily be siblings, cousins, friends. We often think that we're going somewhere for an education, going off to college, that we think it's just this random choice almost. But the spirit world is really working to make sure that we connect with members of the tribe. So you might go there and meet a couple of friends who become friends for life. You have that really deep connection, and
Mm-hmm.
that might have been a greater reason for you going than the actual education itself. You could
Yes.
have gone anywhere for that, but it was important that you went there because those were who you're supposed to meet. It can happen in the workplace or anywhere, and especially with relationships, as you get to be romantic relationships, as you get to be an older soul, then that becomes much more important. Your soul doesn't want to waste time having to sort of almost build intimacy from the ground up with somebody you've never known before, maybe from a radically different soul age.
Mm-hmm.
So it will seek out members of the soul family. Now, unfortunately, things go wrong all the time. We make choices sometimes based on past life issues. Past life fears can sometimes get in the way. So we might have a fear of inferiority, self-worth issues that come from being treated as lesser in a past life. And that could easily cause us to choose somebody who's unsuitable for us, settle in a relationship. That's really, very common. Maybe you have a past life fear of loss, so you end up with choosing somebody more because they've got a good job and some income rather than because you really love them. So the main thing is that you're seeking intimacy. I mean, every old soul, with few exceptions, is really in each life seeking to experience love and get to that sort of deeper emotional place with somebody. So it's a lot easier to do it with a soulmate, somebody, or an old friend, someone you've known before.
So with the notion of a soulmate, we often think, I think in fairy tales and in this lifetime, that there's one soulmate and that's your romantic partner and that's it. But would it mean that you have multiple soulmates, and just in this lifetime, your life path is to be romantically involved with one of them?
Or maybe more than one. Yeah. Well, that's the case, because I think it's a very limiting belief. It's a bit of a myth when people think that there's just that one soulmate, that one person who somehow is going to fix everything, complete everything for you. And sometimes, in a sense, there is, like a couple might meet when they're very young and, go forward, forever. That's, that sort of perfect union. It doesn't always work like that. And even if you meet somebody, you could have a very strong soul agreement with somebody. And the agreements between souls are always about the intention. They never come with any guarantees. It's just, the intention is to come together and have a relationship, or tempted. And unfortunately, I talked about this in my first book with somebody I was working with who was sticking in a horrible relationship. I mean, somebody who was, physically brutal towards her, because she felt that this was a soulmate, and that somehow there was a really important lesson connected with it, so she had to endure that. And that's not how it works. If things are not working out, then your soul will look for something else. And sometimes, you can have this agreement between souls, and they don't work out for whatever reason. I mean, you could, by the time you meet, you make the agreement on the astral plane, but you come together, and whatever reason. I mean, I'll see sometimes timing can be out. Somebody's available for the relationship. They have an agreement with another soul, but that person hasn't gotten divorced yet.
Every time you talk, it spurs so many good streams of consciousness that it's like I have to stay focused for the purpose of this linear podcast. But it takes me to another I don't know, thought dimension. One thing I did want to ask that might be kind of a quick question. Is the sensation of deja vu connected to your soul? Is that like the past life memory where maybe it's something that you haven't experienced in this lifetime, but you're having deja vu? So,
well, my understanding is that more often what's happening there is there's a sort of a little bit of a disconnect between sometimes what's happening here on the physical plane and what's happening more out in the astral plane. So it's like you can be experiencing something, but your soul's already experienced it a little bit ahead of time. Time's fluid on the other side. So so there can sometimes be that it's like you're a little bit out of sync. A common version of that, I mean, you wouldn't consider it quite to be deja vu, but people don't normally recognize that this is actually like almost like a precognitive thing. And I mentioned this in my first book. For me, it was like I noticed when I was a kid that I would think about something. And one I remember very clearly was I'm in the back of the car with my parents, and I keep thinking about we're going to get a flat tire, going to get a puncture. No, it's I can see it. I can see the tire burst and repairing it at the side of the road. And then the next thing, well, maybe like an hour later or something, it happened. And I did what a lot of people do with something like that. I go, oh my God, I made it happen. I wished it, and it happened. But actually, what was happening was I was just experiencing something ahead of time, and it's a kind of precognitive, it's a psychic kind of experience, if you like. But another example of that is that I always used to wonder why bad news came when I felt at my most vulnerable. Always seemed to be, I wake up and I'm feeling like something's out of sorts, something's not right. I feel down, can't explain it. And then it could be hours later that there's a phone call, somebody's died or something's happened. And that what again was happening was the soul was experiencing something ahead of time, and it was starting to filter through. And then it was just like it took a few hours for it to sort of happen and make sense. But I think most people would have some experience of that if they were sort of paying attention. I think you'd notice that does kind of happen.
So maybe the experience of deja vu is that maybe people are just not aware of the step before, and then
It's almost like there's a lag,
Yeah.
and sometimes. And now there may be some other things as well. I mean, it's not something I've gone into in much detail, and I think there are some other aspects, but that certainly is like a major thing. Yeah, time is fluid on the other side, and just there's sometimes we're all a little bit, we can get a bit out of sync. But there can also be, there certainly can be times when something is familiar. You could go into a new place, but you've been there many times before. We were talking about France. You've had past lives, a past life in France. If you've had one, you've probably had multiple. If you're interested and you speak French, and like you're saying, and that comes relatively easily, then that's often a sign you've been somewhere. These are spiritual homes. I find this all the time where people have had past lives in certain places. They have a really strong resonance with it. I'll tell somebody in a session about, oh, you had a life in sometimes a very specific place, and like I mentioned in my book, somebody I was working with. I said, you had a really happy past life in Amalfi in Italy, and I go, oh, I love Amalfi. Went there, had the greatest time. And I was curious because my wife and I were heading to Italy on our honeymoon, and I said, was there anywhere else that you really liked? And she said, well, I don't know, we only went to Amalfi. And it was really interesting to me because that was the place, that was the location of a really happy past life. And it was the only place that she got to in Italy. It was like, and that was just the soul going, all I want to do is I want to re-experience what I had before. I had a really happy past life, and I want to go there. I mean, conversely, you can get really negative experiences with places. If you had a past life somewhere where you were tortured and executed, you're not going to exactly be in a hurry to go back there. You could have some really negative experiences.
Do you think sometimes that can translate into people's hatred of others or of certain races or things like that? Can some kind of
it can certainly play a big part in that. And sometimes I've seen people get a bit sort of embarrassed about it. When I ask them about, well, how do you feel about this particular group of people? When I see that they've had like a terrible experience and that was what the soul took away. I'm thinking of one person I wrote about. She had been basically died on a battlefield as, I think, a British soldier, but surrounded by German voices, and so triggered in this life by German voices, like the accents and the whole sound of it. And she was very embarrassed to share that. She's an otherwise very accepting person, but she's got a huge problem with Germans. So yeah, I mean, you could certainly have that. Somebody else I remember telling me that she had I said, do you have a problem with Koreans? I mean, it was like a bit of an obscure thing, but she'd had a terrible past life in Korea. And you don't, I mean, these things always seem a bit weird, but, she goes, oh my God, Koreans, I don't know how anyone trusts them. It's like, what?
Yeah, no basis, but her soul has that basis.
Yeah, I put in my book little boxes every so often. I call them 100 people in a room. You know, it's like if you had 100 people in a room, this would be the only person who has such a, extreme uh, thing. I mean, actually, literally just yesterday, I asked a client, I saw this severe um, chest trauma, lung trauma in a past life, and physical ailments. So often they're related to past lives. And I said, did you struggle when you were younger with something like childhood asthma, or breathing problems, or weakness in the lungs? And she said, I had pneumonia 30 times. 30 times. It's like,
My goodness, I hope she's staying
yeah.
inside during this coronavirus.
Well, you can imagine how how the coronavirus is going to trigger somebody like
Yeah.
that. It's going
Yes.
so specifically to that part of fear around breathing and so on. Yeah, very naturally, should be very, very concerned about that. I'll be doing a blog post about this one because
Oh,
I mean that's you know, but all the time, I find people with the weirdest idiosyncrasies, strange little quirks that stem from past lives. You know, I was just talking to somebody yesterday about a client who had been a movie art director. She actually, in a past life, had art directed Maltese Falcon, which is one of my favorite films, Humphrey Bogart. And I told her about that, and she said, "Oh my God!" She said, "Well, it explains why when I watch a movie, all I look for is art direction."
hmm.
And I thought most people wouldn't have a clue what
What the?
movie art direction even was.
Yeah.
It's like, and yet this is something that she sees. I mean, we often have this with a past life, as a result of a past life experience, that we have a greater than average appreciation for certain things. I found that people who've been architects in a past life will have a really great appreciation for buildings. For the rest of us, walk past them, we might think, oh, that's interesting, but whatever. We don't really take it all in. But if you've been an architect in a past life, you look at it and go, gosh, that's really fascinating. There's
Mhm.
something, a deeper appreciation. People have been around flowers, so horticulturists would have a green thumb. They'd be drawn to flowers. They would remember the names of them, where another person wouldn't
Can't keep that in your
be able to
brain.
do it.
Hmm.
Yeah, you just have a natural it, and that works for things like healers. I work with a lot of healers, and they if you have multiple past lives, and it doesn't have to be the same discipline or anything. You could be an herbalist in one life, midwife next, surgeon in the next. But if you're drawn to the medical profession or alternative healing in this life, then you're going to easily learn and remember anatomy and the names of things, and it's just everything will come so much more easily. It's like you in French, it's like it's just you've done it several times or multiple times before. It's going to come much more easily.
Hmm.
Uh,
What are some maybe easy first steps that people can do to do past life work, to kind
mm,
of a beginners, maybe kind of 1, 2, 3 on doing
yeah.
some of this work to kind of help heal themselves and be more connected to their life path?
Yeah, I think there's something that it sounds a little weird, but we are all affected by our past lives, but so few of us are aware of that. There's a lot of people don't even believe in reincarnation, whereas
Mhm.
I would say that it explains absolutely everything. But if you think of it, you're totally affected by your past lives. Your likes, dislikes, fears, talents, abilities, all of those sort of things. So one little exercise that can be really interesting is to sit down in a meditation, bring your spirit guides in, ask them to help you, ask them to give you the clarity that you want, and say, can you give me a sense of what my recent past lives have looked like? Or maybe what was my last past life? Think about the things that you're good at, things that intrigue you, interest you, your idiosyncrasies, places you're drawn to, places you're not. And then start to see what comes up for you, because it's not that hard to tap into a past life.
Mm.
Past life regression. When I'm working with somebody one-on-one, I just tell them what happened because it's quicker. I mean, it's a lot easier. I'm
Yeah.
just already in the zone. So in groups, I would regress people and take them into a past life and um, have them do the work. But we can all do it. It's a little bit of a learned skill to
Hmm.
be able to go in. Like if you don't get anything the first time, try again. It's because it can take a little while. But
Hmm.
it's amazing when you set out with that intention to say, well, okay, it could be, I've got a really good mind for engineering, for example, and I'm drawn to that. I'm really good at tinkering with engines. Let's see if there's a past life and just close your eyes and see if you can get something. You might see yourself back or get a sense of yourself back in the past. Maybe you were working with cars in the early days of the automobile or something like that, and they start to explain your life. So you can go and find all these little fragments and
Hmm.
start to piece them together.
And certainly reading your books is another good way to sort of
I
tap
would say
into
that's an
it.
absolutely essential
And
part of this.
essential, yes. Yeah. Well, and it's a nice for me anyway has been a really nice physical item to even hold in my hand to reference back to when doing some of these meditations. So I almost
Yeah.
feel I have support even just through the pages and things, because
Oh, good.
sometimes even though I feel very connected to the spiritual world, and I regularly practice connecting with it, sometimes it feels so fluid that I then, when I come out of it, sometimes have a hard time piecing together some information. And so that I think is taking time to sort of hone in on those abilities.
Yeah, really, it's very important to do that. I always encourage, well, as part of my membership program, the Soul World, we have a regression every month, and I also encourage people to write about whatever experience they have afterwards, because the writing really helps to process, and then the things will pop into your head. It's like, the spirit world's got something to work with, and they'll be giving you sort of ideas and insights and so on. And yeah, and that can really help to piece together everything, to try and make sort of sense of it. I mean, one of the things I'm very fond of saying is that your destiny, your life purpose is not a secret. So an idea that some things are somehow esoteric and being held from us, and the spirit world is desperate to help us. It's like they've no interest in making it harder than it is. They want to give you stuff, and so if you start to really work with them, they will really they'll do their bit. They often say to me, if somebody takes one step towards them, they'll take two towards them.
Mm.
So um, yeah, just using the sort of a combination almost of the intuition, the support of this spirit guides, and wisdom of your soul, along with your intellect, and sort of like saying, well, why? How would this show up? Okay, if this happened, then what does that mean? You can really start to piece together your past and why you're the way you are.
Yeah, and
It's
it's
not a secret.
yeah, and it's nice to have the some of the context that you put it in within the book, because then you can read through some of the past life fears and say, well, that doesn't resonate with me. That doesn't resonate with me.
Mhm.
Oh wow, that one really struck a chord, and then maybe can go into a meditation, call in your spirit guides, and try to explore that one thing so it doesn't feel so overwhelming.
Absolutely, just one at a time. Just to recognize the fears. That I think is, yeah, I agree. I think it's really helpful to be able to identify them, because that's the whole system that I was given, the instruction from the spirit world, is it's broken into chunks, and so it's really easy to figure out. And and I found the system to be, so far, I've been working with it for almost 20 years, and it seems infallible to me. It seems to be like it explains everything. There's nothing that doesn't seem to be connected to it. So yeah, you can identify your fears really easily. Where they're coming from. Is that a past life issue? Most often it is, and then deal with it from there. I mean, the wonderful thing about any past life block, anything that's getting in your way, whether it's your limiting beliefs, I'm not good enough, or I'm not worthy of love, or whatever it might be, or physical ailments that are showing up from past lives, migraines, infertility, pain in your body somewhere, um, phobias. All phobias are past life related. The great thing is that finding these things, finding the past life, is enough to remind the soul that was then, this is now, let it go. And it just can go, all right, we won't worry about it. And that's why I see in my work, I mean, it's people blowing through 20 years of chronic pain, completely overcoming their fears around powerlessness or trust issues or their insecurities and so on. It can happen really, really quickly. And you can get major physical shifts happening as well as, deep emotional stuff as well.
My last major question before we wrap up is there any insight that your spirit guides give you, or I guess how it works when a soul moves into a physical body? Like is it in utero? Is it at birth? Is it at conception? Is it they've been tethered the whole time? I didn't know if you had any insight on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So your soul, think of it when it's on the astral plane, it's just existing as energy. It's planning to come back to the physical plane. It spends time looking for the right circumstances, family to join. They're going to have a baby, and I want to be part of that. It will give me the chance for an education. I want that lesson. I want to interact with these people, and it'll give me the opportunity to do that, to get the things that are very important to the soul. It can figure all that out ahead of time, and then it will come. Well, while someone's pregnant, the soul would probably have it would well, it's always by choice. You choose your parents and they choose
Mm-hmm.
you, which is always why people go, what the hell was I thinking?
Yeah.
But it's always for lessons. There's a reason for it. So that choice can be made, but the soul doesn't actually join the body until really the moment of birth.
Mm-hmm.
It's chosen, and you can tell who that soul is. I've certainly done that many times where I've been able to work with somebody even before they were pregnant. I could tell who that soul was most likely to be,
Mm-hmm.
and that wanted to come in, and how they'd known them before, and some of the things to expect.
Mm-hmm.
It certainly becomes very, very easy if it was 3 months to birth or very, very close. Um, so that the soul's chosen, but it's not actually kind of in there the same. And when my first child was born, I had a moment, a really weird moment, just as the baby appeared, and it was like an out of body experience. I mean, I felt it was like my soul leaving the body for a moment, and I went, wow. So what that turned out to be was, it was to do with my baby's soul coming in just at the moment that happened. There
Mm-hmm.
was like, obviously there's a lot of energy associated with that, and somehow it affected me, so I could tell the actual moment
That's wonderful.
based on that. It was just it's that at that point of the head's plopping out, the soul's going, okay, well, there's something for me to be to
Yeah.
do here. There's not
Yeah.
much to get involved in before.
I've always had that feeling, that notion. It's like something I do know in my soul, that it's like we're creating a human suit for this soul, and that they are infused but separate. That like this is just your body for this particular lifetime, and that's something that I was very. It just sparked so much inspiration in me reading your book and hearing some of these notions that I just felt I had always known, and I was hoping that was the case.
Yes, and the choice of body, so it's
Mhm.
all part of it as well. Choice of the family. Sometimes it's really the choice of family can be to trigger fears so they can be worked on.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's because there can be karma. Maybe your mom owes you from a past life, or something like that. So there's all different reasons.
I could ask you questions for 3 more hours, but we should wrap up for.
I could talk for hours. As you can tell, I love my subject. I find the whole
Yeah,
thing
I love your
fascinating.
subject too. It's given me purpose in a way that is contextualized, to this lifetime. So it is, even before speaking to you, has given me so much, and I thank you for that. And I am been so excited to meet you. How can people connect with you on social media, your website, and then be entered into your giveaway?
All right. Yeah. Well, I'm on Instagram and Facebook, I believe.
Instagram handle is just your full name.
I think
I think
I,
it's I
I
could
think there might be an underscore between the two names. I think it's Ainslie underscore Macleod.
I'll check your
Maybe
Instagram right now. What's your website?
AinslieMacleod.com.
And that's AINSLIE MACLEOD.
Correct. Absolutely.
And then yes, Instagram is Ainslie underscore Macleod. What are the details around your book giveaway?
All right. Yeah. And I'll just mention that we have the Soul World as our community. So it's soulworld.com.
Oh, that a separate
Yeah,
website.
yeah. You can learn about the Soul World membership community there. We have a fabulous community of old souls, and we have classes, Q&As, regressions, messages every day from the guides. I mean, it's like loads of activity in a very, very active forum. It's a really wonderful place for old souls to come gather. So it is my baby's birthday. So we're celebrating the first birthday of my baby, who was born just exactly a year ago, and so I'm very proud of her.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're having just a we're offering like a webinar discussion, and as part of that, we're offering little giveaways. So there'll be things like free books, some free sessions with me, some free membership in the Soul World, and so on. So loads of birthday presents for everyone.
So if people buy,
Actually, I should qualify that. It's not for everyone. Everyone's got the potential. They'll be chosen out of a hat.
yes, so to be entered, you all you have to do is buy the Old Souls guidebook,
Yeah.
and then you will be entered in the contest to.
And if you have already bought it, just let us know. We'll certainly have some prizes for people
Oh
who
yeah, from before
bought
you
it
were doing
before.
that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Wonderful. I hope that everyone that's listening goes and buys all of Ainslie's books.
Yep.
Get yourself involved in the giveaway. And I've had the immense pleasure talking to you and getting to connect with you.
Well, gosh, I mean, the pleasure is all mine, and thank you so much for the opportunity here. And
Thank you.
and well done on all you're doing in the world. It's
Thank
like
you.
it sounds like you're really kind of living the life your soul intended, which
Oh,
is what we should all be doing.
I tried. There's so many times during this podcast I was like, "Don't cry, Ellen. You've got to continue. You've got to keep yourself together." We will talk again. I have so many more questions for you.
Anytime, I'd love to do it.
If you love our podcast as much as we love you, please subscribe. Spotify, you can hit the follow button, and on Apple Podcasts, you can click the 3 dots on the right and click subscribe. Because numbers matter, people. We live in the Matrix. Also, if you'd like to support us so we can aim to run ad-free episodes, go to anchor.fm/l-army/support. That's anchor.fm/ELLE-ARMY/SUPPORT. Peace and love.